A man stood up in this church in Richmond, Virginia. It's called St. John's Church. It's still there today. It's on East Broad Street in Richmond. 250 years ago, yesterday, a man named Patrick Henry stood up in that church in Richmond, Virginia, and he gave a speech that is still remembered now, not just decades or generations later, but literally centuries later. This was, "Give me liberty or give me death." Now, it's not at all clear to historians if Patrick Henry actually said those exact words in that speech that day. Might have been kind of stolen from Shakespeare and later attributed to him. I don't know. But regardless, it was a good speech. It was important. It's credited in part with Virginia choosing to join what would become the Revolutionary War against the tyrannical King George, which is how we got our independence as a nation. It's how ultimately we got our Constitution and our Bill of Rights. It is how we got our democracy. All. And on the occasion of that 250-year anniversary of Patrick Henry's "Give me liberty or give me death" speech, which again, that 250-year anniversary was yesterday, the current governor of Virginia, Republican Glenn Youngkin, went to that church in Richmond, Virginia yesterday, where they reenacted the whole dramatic speech, including the "Give me liberty or give me death" thing, which may or may not have actually been said in that speech 250 years ago. But still, it's a really nice, important thing to commemorate. 250 years, big anniversary. It's a nice thing for Glenn Youngkin to have done, right? Then he left. He walked out of the church, and this is what happened. Let me just show you just one more minute of this here. This is from a different angle. And I think this one is helpful because in this angle, you can see him greeting and shaking hands with the men in wigs who have just done the reenactment, smiling and pretending like nothing's going on around him. And then there's kind of this big reveal when he gets down to the SUV that's waiting for him. Watch. Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin of Virginia, hearing from his constituents in Richmond, Virginia yesterday, his peaceful and nonviolent, but very loud and very angry constituents. You know, because of where we are in the calendar, we are now starting to have lots of commemorations of things related to the 250th anniversary of the founding of our country, right? Our revolt against a tyrannical leader who ruled by fiat, the founding of our democracy and our divided system of government with its checks and balances to prevent the emergence of another king. Lots of anniversaries, lots of historical commemorative events coming up on this theme. Just a note, if you are a politician who is going to try to associate yourself with that history, do be aware that your relationship to our current struggles along these lines in this country, to hold on to our democracy, that will undoubtedly be front of mind for many of your constituents. One of the things that is in our original Constitution from the 1700s is the U.S. Post Office. At the end of last week, we covered a bunch of protests all over the country related to the post office, people fighting to save the post office. Trump has said he wants to effectively abolish it. His top campaign donor, Elon Musk, has said it should be privatized. And when we covered this at the end of last week, I thought this was a lot in terms of public response against Trump on the post office, people standing up to defend the post office. That was the end of last week. Turns out that was nothing compared to what happened this weekend. In our production system here on this show, we can do something on screen that's called a two box that shows two pieces of tape simultaneously at once. I sometimes drive everybody nuts by asking for a four box, which shows four pieces of tape at once. In order to cover the Postal Service protests, we've had to create something we've never done before. It's a 20 box. To even start to show you how many demonstrations and protests there were this weekend just of people defending the U.S. Post Office. This isn't even all of them, but this is as many as we can squeeze onto a screen. I mean, we saw protests in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where the first Postmaster General was Ben Franklin, and in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania as well, in St. Paul, Minnesota, and San Jose, California, and Los Angeles, California, and Providence, Rhode Island, Seattle, Washington, Buffalo, New York, Charlotte, North Carolina, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Green Bay, Wisconsin, Cleveland, Ohio, Melbourne, Florida, Newark, Delaware, Denver, Colorado, Washington, D.C., San Antonio, Texas, Omaha, Nebraska, Roanoke, Virginia, Las Vegas, Grand Rapids, Michigan, Decatur, Georgia, Fort Wayne, Indiana. In Indianapolis, we had to put them up twice because there were two in Indianapolis. In Boise, Idaho, there was a protest to defend the post office on Sunday alongside all these other ones. But in Boise, that followed this additional big protest in Boise on Saturday at the state capitol in Ruby Red, Idaho. At this protest at the state capitol in Idaho, people showed up to defend public lands and the national parks, including some people who showed up in Idaho to that event on horseback. There were other protests this weekend to defend public lands and the national parks at Mount Rainier this weekend in Washington State, and at the Great Smoky Mountains National Park in Tennessee, and in Florissant, Colorado, and in Calabasas, California. See the signs there? Rehire our rangers. In San Luis Obispo, they were protesting for public lands and to preserve the California coast, where Trump is now demanding oil drilling off the California coast. This sign will stick with me from San Luis Obispo this weekend. It's got Smokey Bear, and it says, "Only you can resist fascist liars." As President Trump and his Attorney General and Republicans of all stripes have spent the past couple of weeks trying to intimidate Americans out of specifically protesting against the car company owned by the president's top campaign donor, the American people this weekend showed in very large numbers that they are not going to be dissuaded from peaceful, legal, nonviolent protest for or against anything they want. Because we don't need to clear that with the government. Because we are Americans, and it is our right to peacefully protest if we want to. Look at this. This is Cherry Hill, New Jersey. Look at the size of the protest here. This is just a passerby filming this from his own car as he drove past, and he's driving like at speed, right? But the protest is so big, it goes on for so long, it ends up being kind of a long video in order to try to capture the numbers of people who are out just at this one Tesla dealership in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. The organizers of that protest in Cherry Hill say they think there were 600 or 700 people out at this one protest at this one Tesla dealership just this weekend. Look, it's still going. There were Tesla dealership protests this weekend in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and in Arlington, Virginia, and in Bartlett, Tennessee, and in Franklin, Tennessee, and in Boston, Massachusetts, and in New York. New York City has a Tesla dealership. There's a very large protest at the Tesla dealership in New York City this weekend. In Chesterfield, Missouri, there was a protest at the Tesla dealership. In Chicago, Illinois, in Rockville, Maryland, in Pasadena, California. There was a big one in Pasadena, California this weekend. There has been most weekends in recent weeks in Pasadena. In Washington, D.C., their now recurring protest at their Tesla dealership regularly has a DJ. At the Washington, D.C. Tesla dealership, people are dancing because they are billing this as the Tesla Takedown Dance Party, weekly in Washington. At the Tesla protest this weekend in Austin, Texas, this sign stuck with me. Porsche fast, Ferrari faster, Tesla, you can read it. I never thought that fastest was an imperfect homophone for fascist, but I guess it is, and now I can't stop thinking about it. This weekend in Kalamazoo, Michigan, people turned out for a hands off our Social Security protest. In Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, and in Virginia Beach, Virginia, people turned out to protest against Trump and Musk and the cuts to the federal government. Same thing in Westwood, California, where Congresswoman Maxine Waters turned out in support, as she has for many of the protests that have happened in her district. In terms of town halls with members of Congress, or without them, when people turned out anyway, even though their member of Congress wouldn't come, there's been almost too many of them happening right now to sum them all up. And they're starting to get more attention in the media, and so you may have seen some of the coverage of these elsewhere. I will just tell you, as a person who has been watching this stuff pretty closely for pretty much 8 weeks now, my impression of what's going on with the town halls in particular is that, number one, we're seeing the number of these types of events just explode, including in places you would not necessarily expect to see them. These are definitely not like a blue state liberal area phenomenon. They are that, but they are also everywhere else in the country. You are also, number two, seeing the numbers of people turning out for these things just go through the roof. You're seeing that when Democrats are going to Republican districts to hold town halls where the Republicans won't do it. You're seeing it where Democrats are holding their own town halls, and you are seeing it where they can't get a member of Congress to come to the town hall at all, but Americans just show up. Americans are showing up all over in big and increasing numbers. We are starting to see these numbers both of events and of bodies, and the number of people turning out on individual events, I think, tip over into something that's qualitatively different than what we had previously seen. I'll show you just a little bit of what I mean just from this weekend. Mishawaka, Indiana, right? Not a place we've ever covered here on this show before, but look, hundreds of people turned out to protest against their Republican Congressman Rudy Yakim. I think that's how you say his name. He's refusing to meet with them. And so here in Indiana are his constituents. Ogden, Utah, hundreds of people protesting against their Republican Congressman Blake Moore, demanding that Republican Congressman Blake Moore stand up to Trump. Look at this event, Columbus, Ohio. Jen Psaki had Sherrod Brown on her show tonight talking about organizing in Columbus. Look at this in Columbus, a huge event demanding that Republican Ohio Senators Bernie Moreno and John Husted meet with their constituents, that they find it within themselves to stand up to Trump. Another huge event in Lexington, Kentucky. Look at this. Demanding that Republican Congressman Andy Barr stand up to Trump, or at least show up and talk to his constituents about why he won't. In Lewiston, Idaho, and in Moscow, Idaho, two big empty chair town halls to which Republican Congressman Russ Fulcher would not show up to face his Idaho constituents. Nearly 1,000 people turned out in Billings, Montana, demanding to meet with their Republican senators and Congressman Troy Downing. In Cape Fear, North Carolina, they had a more than full house at a huge event for Senator Thom Tillis. 150 people turned away at the door. Senator Thom Tillis did not show up to meet his constituents. They put a comedian on stage wearing a giant foam core cutout of Tillis's face and the face of Republican David Browser, their Republican congressman in Cape Fear, who also did not show up. Hey, you guys, this is what your constituents are doing without you when you don't show up for constituent events. In Waterloo, Iowa, a packed house full of Republican Congresswoman Ashley Hinson's constituents. The Congresswoman herself not even answering questions from some local media about why she won't show up or talk with people in her district. Same thing with Republican Congresswoman Mary Miller, a no-show in rural Jacksonville, Illinois, where her constituents, according to local news reports of this event, they really, really want to talk with her about Medicaid cuts, which they think will be absolutely devastating in her district. But she's a no-show. Congressman Neil Dunn is a Florida Republican. He represents a district in Tallahassee. Veterans in his Florida district are demanding that he at least look them in the eye when he doesn't stand up to what Trump is doing and what he's allowing to happen. Watch this local coverage.
American Legion Hall at one point standing room only.
Today, I think 500 people said loud and clear, we don't want drastic cuts to federal programs. We don't want a unilateral king like president, frankly.
An invitation extended to Congressman Neil Dunn left unclaimed. Neighbors left disappointed as they say they wanted the representative to hear their long list of concerns, which include the Department of Government Efficiency's plans to cut 83,000 jobs from the Department of Veteran Affairs.
I am extremely disappointed in the way things are going, and I don't look for any easy time ahead for the country.
13,000 veterans in Leon County, hundreds of them doing different things to get Dunn's attention, including a silent protest bright and early outside City Hall, where the congressman himself hosted a U.S. Military Service Academy Day.
We're introducing the high school students and actually some middle school students to a program that my office sponsors that prepares them to be better candidates for the military academies.
All of us here that we're serving are using the VA in one way or another. So the dichotomy of him wanting to sign people up at the same time as throwing the rest of us away is repugnant to me.
Representative Dunn and his team declined to comment on either of Saturday's movements.
We're brothers and sisters, and we honor one another. Sorry.
A sensitive subject for many local veterans who fear the idea of reduced benefits, support, and honor, not only for themselves, but for future veterans as well.
Thank you for serving. You know, if you decide to join at this point, but it is certainly within the realm of possibilities of someone say, I can't see joining if this is what's going to be behind me.
Despite the VA secretary's promise that benefits will not be affected by job cuts, neighbors tell me they still disagree and feel threatened by recent actions from the White House.
What are we going to do?
And they're determined to use the power of community to make their voices heard.
To step forward and save our democracy. Save our democracy. We can do it.
That's from the ABC affiliate WTXL in Tallahassee, Florida. This is from San Diego, California.
Town hall was standing room only, and it was called an empty chair town hall because attendees say Representative Issa refuses to engage with his constituents.
Here you can see every seat filled in a venue that seats more than 300 people.
To see all these people, you know, I just felt, I was overwhelmed. I just feel so good about coming here.
Tonight we met 93-year-old Betty Reeves. This town hall was organized to give people like her a chance to share their concerns about Representative Issa and the Trump administration. The town hall was put on by a group called Indivisible. It says its mission is to combat the Trump administration's policies. This week, they plan to hold more events, including a large rally protesting the administration's latest actions. That will be held at the Civic Center in downtown San Diego on April 5th. Community members say they plan to continue advocating for their rights.
Everybody out there, pay attention to the way the country's going. You just have to pay attention and listen.
Jasmine Ramirez, CBS 8.
And that's from San Diego. I just want to show you just one more. I just showed you one from California, the previous one from Florida. This one is from the border, from the northern border. Last one, just watch this.
This was incredibly unique in the fact that on this side of the Detroit River, there were protesters, and then on the other side, there were Canadian protesters, all fighting for the same cause. From the U.S. to Canada, protesters gave their take on tariffs.
We were protesting what's happening to the United States and how we're treating our neighbor.
Organizers say the demonstration is in response to President Donald Trump's tariffs against Canada.
What's happening with our allies, Canada, there's a lot of people very upset.
Earlier this week, President Trump defending the tariffs.
We're going to be getting back some of the wealth that very, very foolish presidents gave away.
Protesters also called out Trump for his recent remarks about making Canada part of the U.S. Demonstrators taking pride in the turnout.
By seeing this many people coming out on a cold day in Detroit, maybe it'll have some impact.
There's an awful lot of people here, and we have our friends across the river looking at us.
I'm telling you, it's everywhere. The Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez rallies in the last few days turned out just massive numbers of people. 34,000 people in Denver on Friday. More than 23,000 people came out the next day, Saturday, in Tucson. Numbers like that are turning everyone's heads in politics, and they should. But do not sleep on the fact that there are so many Americans showing up in so many places on literally every single day of the week in every single freaking state in the country, every single one of them trying to figure out how they can most effectively oppose this president and what he's doing to the U.S. government. And you know, we've got a lot to cover tonight in the wake of those massive, the massive number of protests defending the U.S. Postal Service. Trump's Postmaster General, Louis DeJoy, tonight has resigned effective immediately. Axios is reporting tonight that Trump's acting director of Social Security told people at a meeting today that these ruinous cuts and radical policy changes that they're forcing through to Social Security right away. He told people at a meeting today, according to Axios, that these cuts and changes are happening explicitly at the demand of the White House. These are the changes that the former Social Security Director, Martin O'Malley, told us here on Friday night. He believes bring the Social Security system 90% of the way to breaking entirely. The acting director of Social Security Administration saying that those changes are happening, and they're happening at this pace specifically because the White House is demanding it. Also today, Washington has just been rocked by this insane story of Trump's National Security Advisor, his Secretary of Defense, his Intelligence Director, his CIA Director, his Secretary of State, his Treasury Secretary, and apparently the guy in charge of everything at the actual White House, whose name is Stephen Miller, all participating apparently in a group text over Signal in which they circulated detailed war plans and apparently classified information about a military attack in Yemen. They did it in a group text. And the reason we know is because they accidentally included the editor-in-chief of the Atlantic magazine in the group text while they were planning that military operation. We're going to talk about that with Senator Mark Warner, top Democrat on the Intelligence Committee tonight, and there's a lot more to get to. I will just say, though, just in closing, word to the wise. If there are any Democratic elected officials within the sound of my voice, any Democratic senators in particular, who are watching this kind of stuff that we have been covering, right? Who are watching this huge upsurge in energy and the American people getting up and getting out and showing up in person and doing everything they can as regular people to try to find a way to save this country and to fight what Trump is doing. If there are any Democrats who are watching that, who want to try to latch on to some of that, want to tap into some of that, want to do what they can with that public upsurge, may I just note that tomorrow in the United States Senate is the confirmation hearing for Trump's nominee to permanently lead the Social Security Agency. That might be an occasion on which people would be looking to hear from you and see if you can do something to make a difference. Tomorrow also will be the Senate Intelligence Committee's Worldwide Threats hearing. Good time for that. That hearing, among other things, will take testimony from at least a couple of the people who were on the group text with all the apparently classified information about the forthcoming military operations that included a journalist because they had no idea he was there. I mean, this may not be time for give me liberty or give me death, but it is time for give me something. And tomorrow, Washington is going to afford a couple of very big opportunities for Democrats to show what they have to offer to a country that is looking for Democrats to have something to offer. Be right back.